Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to another Brunch and Learn from Twitter Business. Great to see so many of you still logging on and taking time out of your day. Thanks for that. You've joined us for what we hope will be an interesting, informative and enjoyable session. Today's webinar will take about 30 minutes or so. And of course, we're covering the topic or the business of sport. My name is Rob Power. I manage the customer success team for Twitter Business in the UK and Ireland. And today I'm joined by two Twitter ad specialists from our customer success team, Ellie Miraz and Brian Manning, both of whom have tons of experience helping brands of all shapes and sizes achieve their marketing goals with Twitter. A little bit about what we're going to cover, what we're going to talk about today. So Ellie is going to start off by taking you through the roar of the stadium. Now, what does that mean? Well, we're seeing fans who have missed out on so many live events over the last year. They're really engaging more than ever with sport content on Twitter. And Twitter has become a surrogate for those events with all the hype, action, and the post-game analysis taking place on the platform. Ellie's also got some really cool examples of a brand in particular in the US. As we know, the US have gone through this already, so they had a huge hype around the return to live events, live sport last summer. So we're kind of looking at those wins to see what we can learn there. And Ellie's going to share a really good example from stateside. Then Brian is going to take you through the anatomy of sport on Twitter. So what does it look like on the platform when these events are happening? What's the difference in the timeline? How do brands engage? What are they tweeting about? What are users looking at? And the timing of all that as well around the events. And if you have a brand that wants to engage around a specific event, and you're going to hear this mentioned a few times today, but you're missing a trick if you confine your campaigns just the time of the event itself. There's so much more going on both before and after the event as well. And Brian's going to finish up with some stats and some tips and tricks for aligning your brand to these huge moments on Twitter. We're going to round it off with some Q&A. So you'll see on the Blue Jean screen, just on your right-hand side, there is a Q&A button. Please feel free to submit questions at any stage throughout the presentation. We'll collect those and we'll have some time towards the end where myself, Ellie and Brian will talk through some of those and hopefully provide you with a little bit more insight. We're also tweeting about the event, so we're at Twitter Business. Please feel free to tweet us any questions or comments you have. Use the Summer of Sport hashtag and let your followers know what you're thinking about looking at our session here today. So what is it that makes 2021 a particularly good summer of sport? Well, normally we'd see the end of domestic and European football in the next couple of weeks. City and Chelsea are battling it out in the Champions League final at the end of this month. But we're only beginning to reap a bumper crop of sport this summer. Some of that is, I suppose, facilitated by the rescheduling of tournaments that were supposed to be last year. It's still called Euro 2020, but that is the kickoff of what is going to be a really big summer of sport. It'll be followed then by one of the summer's mainstays in sporting calendar, which is Wimbledon. And then we have the Olympics coming up. So the Olympics this year is going to be a very different time zone for us here in UK and Ireland. People will be using Twitter to catch up on live events, but let us know your thoughts on that. How will you be engaging with the Olympics? Lions Tour coming up at the same time, and then the Paralympics. The Paralympics is a great event. It's growing in prominence every year, and we're seeing more interest from both consumers and brands in Paralympic events. Finally, something I'm very much looking forward to, maybe a little bit tenuous calling it the summer, but in September we're going to have the Ryder Cup as well. So as I said, we'll be sharing a lot of info with you today, but we'd like you to share too. Please do use the hashtag, engage with us on Twitter. Let us know what events you're looking forward to of some of the events I've just mentioned there. Do you feel your brands that you're working with are particularly engaged around certain events? Share your thoughts with your followers and use the hashtag so that we can all learn from each other as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you on to Ellie, who's going to take you through the first section, which is the roar of the stadium. Over to you, Ellie.
Thank you, Rob, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie, and I am Customer Success Account Manager here in the UKI team at Twitter. As we all know, the UK is easing out of lockdown, and live sports are finally returning to our screens this summer. With so much to be excited about, today I want to talk to you about what changes brands can expect in fan behavior with the return of the sport, and the role Twitter plays in the consumer and brand experience. We conducted an online quantitative study with sport fans across the UK, And there are three key insights that brands need to be aware of when engaging with sport fans. So type them down. The first is that fans are flocking to Twitter to engage with their favorite sporting events like never before. Secondly, Twitter has become the roar of the stadium as fans look for new ways to participate in the live sport experience and share their passion with others. And finally, there are many ways for brands to join the excitement and elevate the fan experience on Twitter. In the next few slides, I will bring you through these points in more detail. So take a coffee and join me. People on Twitter are engaging with sports much more than ever. So now is the perfect time to connect your brand with this growing audience. Over half of the general population of the UK, 57%, suggested that they would engage with the sports that they will never have followed before COVID-19. This increases to 72% of people on Twitter. What's interesting is that 40% of people use Twitter as a second screen while watching live sports. I personally love Chicharito Hernandez, one of the best Mexican football athletes that Mexico has. And since he joined Manchester United, I'm a big fan of that team, becoming one of those fans supporting my favorite athletes during the gaming Twitter. This is a great opportunity for brands to join this conversation, support your local team, and interact with fans and align your brand with the values and excitement of the game. But even though live sport is back this summer and some fans, like me, may have to wait a little longer for live stadium audiences to return, it doesn't matter if you can or you cannot go to the stadium. Fans are looking to Twitter to recreate the fellowship and excitement of the event. So even though the stadiums may be quiet for now or not, Twitter is more alive than ever. Half of people on Twitter agree that joining the live conversation during a match helps them feel more connected to the sports that they love and that they can't be there in person. This is significantly higher in Twitter than on competitor platforms. So now that I have spoken a little about how fans are using Twitter to connect with their favorite sports and mimic the roar of the stadium, let's discuss what behavior fans are expecting from your brand and how you can elevate the fan experience. I will also share a cool example of how one US advertiser in particular really made the most of the return of the live sport. Summer 2021 is all about optimism for the reopening of the economy and the return of live sports. 2% of people in Twitter expect brands to reflect this excitement of live sport. And this increases dramatically for fans of key events like the Olympics, the FIFA World Cup, the Premier League, and of course the Euros. Sharing this excitement of fans can take many forms. For example, two in three people can want brands to foster a sense of community with sports fans while they can attend live events in person. It is also important that brands start conversations that fans can engage with. This is a great way to insert your brand into this excitement and connect to your audience. The return of sport is a major milestone as fans see sports as a great way to feel normal again after the pandemic. We know that people on Twitter want brands to share in the excitement that's building with these big sport events. So let me give you an example of how DraftKings, a US brand, did and saw excellent results. DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports mirrors seasons-long fantasy sport, but condenses the experience into shorter day or week-long contests. They also have a sport betting app, and their audience is passionate about basketball, hockey, football, and UFC, among others. In July 2020, when live sports were starting to come back in the US, DraftKings launched their Return to Sports campaign series to connect with the nationwide movement and excitement. They used Twitter's takeover products and premium video solutions to drive brand awareness during the first phase of the campaign, and then shift focus to mobile app promotion to drive customer acquisition and in-app engagement closer to live sporting events. In a minute, Brian, my friend, is going to tell you a little bit about how the sports conversation looks on Twitter. But just a little spoiler. Brands who leverage the pre- and post-game conversations see great results. And DraftKings knew this. They used moment ads and conversation button to engage fans when they were leaned into these big sporting events. Finally, to track and measure the results, DraftKings worked closely with their internal and external data sources, measuring real-time conversions and in-app actions. DraftKings also had high expectations for this campaign. However, in some instances, Twitter results doubled and tripled their goals. I hope the stats in the DraftKings example give you some food for thought. Put simply, Brands that connect with what's happening on Twitter can build relevance with their audience, and the upcoming Summit of Sport is a great opportunity to do that. So, to quickly recap, there are 3 main points to keep in mind when connecting with sports fans like me on Twitter. Number 1, people on Twitter are excited for the return of sports and more engaged with sports than ever before the pandemic. Number 2, Twitter helps fans feel connected to live events and provides a platform for them to share the experience with fellow fans and lean in brands alike. And finally, number 3, brands on Twitter that share in the excitement of fans and foster a sense of community can help elevate the live sport experience for the audience, driving cultural relevance. That's it from me for now. So I will pass you to over Brian, who will speak to you about the anatomy of a sport on Twitter.
Thanks for the intro, Ellie. My name is Brian, and I'm also on the customer success team at Twitter. So over the next few slides, I'm going to help you understand the sports conversation, when to connect with live events, as well as how to align your brand to specific events this summer. So one of the main reasons we're looking forward to the summer is because of the incredible sporting events that we have lined up. We have the Olympics, Wimbledon, the Euros, which are all set to be huge on Twitter. So fans are already excited and tweeting about their favorite events. Conversation is growing daily. So since January, there's been a 122% increase in Euro 2021 conversation. We can expect the conversation to keep building throughout the tournament and post-event. So there's always activity on football Twitter, but a month ago we all know about the European Super League. So the sentiment wasn't great and fans made their voice heard. So we can see here an example of a Tottenham, or someone comparing Tottenham to joining the Super League to Banana Man joining the Avengers. So you get an idea of the sentiment there. But that's all behind us now, and we have an overriding sense of what the Euros is going to be. Good football on the telly, a few beers with your friends, maybe even in a pub for some, not for us in Ireland probably. And finally, the feeling that something at least is getting back to normal. So football fans aren't the only ones who are excited. The Olympics conversation is also gaining momentum. Last month alone, there was a 77% increase in tweets about the Olympic Games. Fans aren't just on Twitter to share their excitement for the games, they also use it as their primary news source and any updates that are around the games. So Olympic fans are also using Twitter to connect throughout the games. So we see conversation spikes during some of the more popular events. This graph here tracks the conversation around the Rio Games in 2016. And unsurprisingly, fans rushed to the Twitter for some of the biggest moments. So the swimming and gymnastic finals to Usain Bolt winning the 100-meter finals. So planning your campaign accordingly means you align your brand with the moments that fans are at their most passionate and join in on these moments of celebration. So even though the conversation spikes during moments of celebration, fans are still tweeting weeks in advance of the games. So they tune in to express their excitement, join pre and post game conversations, enjoy direct access to talent, and they can watch exclusive clips and information pieces. So brands that wait to connect until the live events are happening are missing out on most of the action. So this means that the real opportunity is for brands to get ahead of the competition and join the conversation early in a way that feels authentic to the audience. So you might remember from the DraftKings example that Ellie went through, brands that align their messaging with the live event and the pre and post event excitement tend to see the best results. So we've seen brands do this in the past and they received twice as much engagement from fans, a 35% higher view through rate, as well as double the cost efficiency. So this is really important to think about how you interact with your audience before, during, and after an event. So sports fans uniquely turn to Twitter during live events as their second and primary screen to join in and learn what's happening in real time. So during live events, people on Twitter increase their usage by 15%, in contrast to Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, where we see a 7% drop in dwell time. So this comes down to Twitter's look at this platform rather than look at me nature. So it's a place where people come to connect with the wider conversation, share their views rather than uploading selfies or pictures of what they're eating and drinking during the events. So Twitter can go hand in hand with your television strategy, and it's proven to change the way people experience live events on TV. Twitter provides a sense of community for fans, which has become more important than ever during the course of the pandemic. So viewers show an increase in engagement and detailed memorability when using Twitter as a complement. as a complement to their TV events. So the best way for your ads to resonate with fans during live events is to layer Twitter into your TV activation. And a few points to keep in mind are to amplify your message, so engage with your audience with relevant messaging by extending TV campaigns onto Twitter. Build tentpole moments, so use the second screen to grab mindshare during TV events. And conquer the competition, so reach users who have been exposed to your competitors' TV ads. So to sum up, whether it's the Olympics or the Euros or any of the summer's major sporting events, fans are already excited and tweeting about them more each day. So make sure you join the conversation early to maximize your impact. Brands that join the conversation pre-post as well as during tend to drive better results. And finally, Twitter is the best complement to your TV strategy, driving significant increases in engagement and memory encoding. So now the next section, I'm going to be talking about how you can align your brand with sport on Twitter and the best ways to connect to the sporting conversation. So there are many ways for brands to engage with their audience and be creative on Twitter. So I'm going to give you 3 tips that will help you connect with sport fans on Twitter. So they are sharing relevant content. I'll come back to what relevant means. Join the conversation. So your customers want to hear from brands about things that they care about, and then make real connections, which I'll come back around to. So I can share these tips with confidence because they are supported by studies we ran following the Rio 2016 Olympics. So we asked Twitter users what type of content stuck with them most. The answers were brand that shared excitement for the games, brand that joined the conversation around Olympics, and brands that were able to draw a real connection between their value and the games. Here's an example of BP who shared the story of Ilham Zakayev. He's a Paralympic wrestler, and he gave ads a sense of struggle that he faced and also a feeling of positivity and hope surrounding his participation in the games. So respondents were positive about the uplifting tone, and generally we see a higher interest in stories of global unity and campaign messaging which supports inclusivity. So an example here from Under Armour, so showing how they joined the conversation with an ad about Michael Phelps, the US medalist. So Rio was due to be Phelps' final games, and there was a heightened interest in his participation. Under Armour realised that the conversation is happening well in advance of the actual games, and they use the opportunity to win share of voice ahead of their competitors. And then finally, your brand needs to connect. So there should be a clear link between your message and what's happening on Twitter. When you think of Dove, you think of the Real Beauty Pledge, the Self-Esteem Project, and female empowerment. So this tweet calling out sexism in the media is really well suited. So they're sharing the sentiment of a lot of fans, and it's timely and it's on brand. So we've spoken about why sport is important on Twitter, and we've looked at how brands can tap into the conversation effectively. So I'm going to wrap up now by showing you just a couple of slides on Twitter formats. So trend takeovers, so they give you exclusive access to Twitter's most seen, most impactful, and most talked about ad placement for 24 hours. So as a result of user growth and product improvements, trend takeovers now serve more impressions than ever, making the effective CPM for takeover placements the best it's ever been. So this is a really great product for brands who are looking to scale their reach at critical moments. Then we have Trend Takeover Plus. So we can add an immersive creative to your message on the Explore tab to drive an even bigger impact. And we have an example here of Disney use Trend Takeover Plus. So this package gave Disney exclusive real estate on the Explore tab, as well as a high impact visual that drives sustained awareness and engagement. So this placement is incredibly powerful at driving enhanced ad recall and purchase intent. So in fact, last year we've seen a 70% increase in Explore tab visitation. So people are clicking through to see what's going on and what's happening in the world all the time. Don't be just part of what's happening, be what's happening with trend takeovers. So next I want to mention Twitter Amplify. So Twitter Amplify is a way for brands to connect with Twitter's premium brand save content. So in this example, our partnership with ITV allows brands to buy a series of clips that will air around the England friendlies next month. So your brand leverages in on a leaned in audience who are watching exclusive content and allows you to showcase your pre-roll ad before this content. So the targeting is fully customizable and the ARB environment is fully brand safe. So you won't find Twitter amplifying the dashboard. So if it's something that you are interested in, reach out to your Twitter account. So on Twitter, we have many engaging formats available, from promoted video and pre-roll to drive awareness. We have conversation cards and media polls, which can be used creatively to drive fun and interactive engagement with customers. And if you're more interested in downstream metrics, carousels, website cards, app cards can be used to drive results in those direct response campaigns. Please feel free to get in touch with your account manager to get their thoughts on what the best option is for you. That's it from me, so I'm going to pass it back over to Rob again.
Thanks very much for that, Brian, and thanks, Ellie. Really informative. A lot of stats in there. We'll give everyone a chance just to keep funneling your questions through the Q&A, and I'll just do a quick recap there, just a little look at what we saw in the presentation. 3 key things for me, I guess. There's a huge summer of sport ahead on Twitter, and so in the world, I guess, and Twitter is where the conversation is going to play out, and we've seen that and what happens then when that conversation plays out, how brands respond. The Twitter users are more engaged and excited about sport than ever before, and they expect to see and hear from brands. So it's very much an expected experience for brands to be talking about these events and engaging in those conversations. And brands can connect with consumers by sharing the excitement, as Brian said, by being part of the conversation and critically connecting their message to what's happening. And if you see back to the Dove example, is a really good example of that. But if there's anything that jumped out at you over the last 30 minutes or something you'd like to know a little bit more about it, please feel free now to continue to put your questions into the chat, or you can get in touch with your account manager. I'll come on to that in a minute. But we'll just go through a couple of the questions that have come in so far. Ellie, one here for you. I might just start with you. What are the best ad formats on Twitter to interact with sports fans?
Well, as Brian mentioned, there are many formats that we can use, and the best will be the best that suits you for your goals. However, we will encourage you to use the video formats, which are more interactive and give much more attention to your users. However, if you don't have the resources, because we know that some advertisers doesn't have a lot of resources to build new videos and in different formats, in Twitter, remember that if you change the copy, it's another ad considered. In each campaign, we recommend to have from 3 to 5 ads. So if you have the same video or the same image, just to changing by the copy paste, the copies in the tweet, that will be a different tweet. So consider that every time that you make a campaign, just to have better optimization and better results.
Yeah, I think video is something that we've seen work really well on the platform. Brian, have you got any kind of tips and tricks about how you would use video? Like, for instance, what kind of length of time have you seen working for advertisers?
Yeah, so we recommend having a video from about 6 to 15 seconds, have, prominent branding, make the message very concise. Also plan a sound off strategy. So audio doesn't autoplay on Twitter, so make sure that you have text there in the video so your message does actually cut through to people.
Great, yeah. Ellie, a really good one. We've mentioned a lot this morning about how brands engage post-game and pre-game, and they're seeing great results doing that. But for a B2B brand or B2B company listening to the webinar this morning, how can they do that? How should they get involved?
Yeah, for B2B companies is quite tricky because it's all about the creative part of your brand. In this case, as a B2B company, you can also have your own values as a company, such as loyalty, such as team, etc. And also these same values are also experienced in events such as sports. You can talk around the excitement of how a loyalty team is in the sport, or even you can say about, hey, right now, just before checking the match football that is coming this weekend, why not you just check the loans that we have or we offer for you? There is like a really creative way just to connect with the audience. But yeah, like I will suggest just to try it and build that audience and build that story pre, during, and post the event.
Great. Thanks for that. A couple of quick fire questions just coming in, which hopefully I can answer. Will we be receiving the deck to share with our team members? Yes, you will. We will share the webinar recording with everyone who has registered as attended this morning. We have a question from Ireland. Any specific learnings on insights into the return of the GAA? We don't have specific research done on it, but if you would like to email advertiserhelp@twitter.com and address that, we can probably follow up and see what we can do there to find out in terms of an Irish audience what the interest might be there. There was another question about getting in touch, so just the answer was in that one is please email advertiserhelp@twitter.com. I'll go on and share a couple more resources to get in touch as well in a minute. A little bit more, Brian, can you tell us, is there a price difference on takeovers? Do you want to maybe talk a little bit more broadly about takeovers, how they work in terms of geo-targeting and price differences there?
Yeah, so there is different pricing depending on country because different countries will have different audience reach. So it does depend on which country it is. So you would need to get in touch with advertiser help or your account manager, and we can give you details on the pricing of those.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, another question from Amplify, as Brian mentioned, both the Amplify and Takeover are not available in the dashboard. You will need to get in touch with an account manager to do that. So again, please email us to find out a little bit more there. Ellie, question here on Twitter polls. Do you have any tips for getting high engagement on Twitter polls?
Yeah. The best will be have a plan around that format that you're using. For example, in this case is Twitter polls. Then what will be the goal to using it? Is it just a topic that is it a cultural relevant event that you are building it? Is it about your product, or is it about something that is going to happen in the future? So this planning of the formats that you're using is relevant for the audience, so you can retarget the same audience that connect to that ad, and then also remarketing them in other format or in other campaign that you're building to. That's really relevant when you interact with the audience, and little by little you get insights from them. And finally, I will also suggest, if you're using polls, to use them smartly, which means could be cultural relevance, it could be your products, and it could be something that maybe your audience is not waiting or is not expecting, and it's how you can connect and how you can break the ice and the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I'd agree with that. And I think a lot of what we spoke today is around the conversation around sport. So look, if your poll is involved in sport, align it with a specific event, I guess. And that goes for any type of event. When you know the conversation is going to be happening on Twitter, it's a critical time to get your media poll out there. An interesting question here, Brian, I might go to you on it. If you have any ideas on how to promote a podcast on Twitter, what would you suggest for them?
It would depend on probably the category of the podcast. I would probably start off by targeting, maybe similar follower lookalikes and keywords that are, related to your topics that you're talking about. If there's any kind of hashtags that are going around currently, which, people who are interested in podcasts are talking about, always just search Twitter, make use of the Twitter platform. So just go in to twitter.com, search for a hashtag, and you'll get your insights from there. People are just sharing tweets constantly. So you can tap right into the conversation and see what would be the best keywords, what's the best follower lookalikes to be targeting. That would be my suggestion.
Just answering also Brian's question, if you are building already a podcast weekly over week, you can also, in your introduction or in your goodbye statement, every time that you do some podcast, you can also mention Twitter and that your social media and say, hey, tag us, hashtag, blah, 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 podcast, this brand. So you can also interact with your audience little by little, even though they listen to your podcast after or later. That's also a way how you can just follow up the conversation and understand all your users and audiences, what is this topic that they are really looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And a lot of it is about building your organic presence on Twitter as well, so that it fits hand in glove with your promoted strategy. If there's someone there who's interested in podcasts, you might be very interested in Twitter's latest feature, which is Spaces. So Spaces is a voice-only group chat, if you like. That could be really interesting for a brand to try out. It's an organic feature, just released a month or two ago, I think. You may see it on the top bar of your Twitter timeline, but that would be a really interesting campaign to see a podcast, maybe deliver a podcast. You can invite in guests and speak on the platform. There could be a really interesting use of that. I haven't seen that done yet. Any other questions there? For B2B, any specific keywords or conversations that these brands should be looking at for B2B targeting? Anything specifically comes to mind, Ellie?
For retargeting,
I think just general targeting for B2B.
yeah. Well, the more keywords and specifications you build on the targeting part on Twitter, the wider the more reach you will have in your campaign. So the more you can add there, the better. First, secondly, broadly, just I will make like a benchmark of if there are any competitors that you have in your industry. Just look at them. What are the keywords that you have there? What are the hashtags that are following or the brands? And you can also mention those accounts and keywords into the targeting. It's very important because it's around the same industry that they are talking to. So that will be really broad recommendation.
Excellent. And Brian, just to make it a little bit more specific for today, for a brand interested in getting involved in running a campaign alongside and reaching these sporting audiences, what kind of targeting would you recommend for them?
So there's always going to be different hashtags. There could be match specific hashtags, or there could be like a piece of news that comes out. So look at the language that people are using and use that within your targeting, because this is how the targeting is done. So if I engage with hashtag England, Wales, and so many other people, that's where your audience is built from. So make sure that you're looking at that and what's coming up in the news, what's upcoming, and incorporate that into your targeting. And also analyze your targeting. So don't just bank on a couple of things, analyze it and change things that are performing well and remove things which aren't performing well to optimize your campaigns.
Great. There's one final question, and I think I know who asked it. Is football coming home? I won't ask you to answer that one, Brian, but who do you think is going to win the Euros?
I'm hoping for Finland because we are doing a sweepstakes and they're my team.
That's how it works. Yeah.
No,
Ellie, how are you?
Spain. Yeah, it's kind of the best, I think, so far.
Excellent. Well, look, just a couple more slides. People have asked about how to get in touch. So just on the next slide, I have a little bit of detail on that. Please feel free, as I said, to email us at advertiserhelp@twitter.com. Do include the hashtag Summer of Sport in your email, and we'll get back to you there. There's a couple of questions which we can get onto the specifics of if you'd like to email us in. Please visit the Twitter website, business.twitter.com, for some of the examples and case studies that you've seen today, some of the stats and more. And of course, follow us on Twitter at Twitter Business. If you have a phone, you want to take it out, I'm going to show you a QR code here now. Our Summer Hub is up and running. So on our Summer Hub, we have a host of resources from the summer infographics, from some stats that we shared today, some new ones as well as a couple more case studies. So do check that out if you have an interest in campaigns running on Twitter over the summer. Should be very, very useful. So that's all from us today. Again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate you taking the time out to hear about sport and how it's happening on the platform. I wish you all the very best for a great week and a fantastic summer. Thanks very much.